Stop, Arthur. For the love of God, don't open it. Eleanor's voice was a shriek, a sound so sharp and terrified it sliced through the cozy quiet of our living room. My hand, already poised to tear the festive paper from the large, elegantly wrapped box, froze in midair. It was Father's Day, and this was the grand gift from our son, Thomas, and his wife, Amelia. It had arrived by special courier that morning, an ostentatious display that was entirely their style. I had been touched, genuinely moved by the gesture. My heart, a foolish old muscle that still insisted on hope, had swelled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Now that warmth was rapidly turning to ice. I looked at my wife. Eleanor's face, usually a gentle landscape of soft wrinkles and kind eyes, was a mask of pale, wide-eyed horror. Her finger, trembling, pointed at the corner of the box. "Look," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Just look at it." "You haven't really looked." My gaze followed her shaking finger. What was I missing? It was just a box, wrapped in expensive, shimmering gold paper with a ridiculously large blue bow. But then I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible detail. Near the bottom corner, where the paper was folded into a neat, crisp edge, the pattern was minutely disturbed. A small, dark smudge, no bigger than a pinprick, marred the perfect sheen. It looked like a burn mark, but it wasn't. As I leaned closer, my old eyes straining, I caught a faint, almost sterile scent, something acrid and chemical that didn't belong with paper and ribbon. It was the smell of a laboratory of cold, calculated purpose. My blood ran cold. The memory, the one I had pushed down into the darkest cellar of my mind, came rushing back with the force of a tidal wave. It was their words, Amelia's mostly, with Thomas's weak, compliant agreement echoing her venom. "He's just an old man, Tommy. He's sentimental and soft. He won't suspect a thing. Once he signs the papers, we can finally move on with our lives, unburdened. This is for the best. He'll be more comfortable, and so will we." I had stood in the shadow of the hallway, my hand on the doorknob of my own study, frozen by the casual cruelty of their conversation. They thought I was out for my evening walk. They were discussing my future as if I were a piece of inconvenient furniture to be disposed of. That was 3 months ago. 3 months of playing the part of the doting, slightly senile father they believed me to be. 3 months of smiling through their condescending questions and feigned concern. And now this box, this beautifully wrapped Trojan horse sitting on my coffee table. The loving card attached, signed in Thomas's familiar scrawl, now seemed like a cruel joke. "To the best dad in the world. We love you more than words can say." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They did love something more than words could say. My money, the assets I had spent a lifetime building, the security I had carefully cultivated for my and Eleanor's final years. They saw it as their birthright, a prize to be claimed, and they saw me as the frail, doddering obstacle standing in their way. I looked from the sinister little mark on the box to Eleanor's terrified face, and then I looked inward, into the cold, quiet place where my heartbreak had solidified into something hard and unyielding. The time for playing the fool was over. The time for grief had passed. They had mistaken my patience for weakness, my love for stupidity. They had misjudged their father completely, and for that I would make them pay. A slow, cold smile spread across my face, a grimace that felt alien and yet perfectly natural. Oh yes, I would open their gift. But not here, not now. I would open it in front of them, and when I did, I would unpack not just its contents, but the full measure of their treachery, and the swift, devastating totality of my revenge. The game they started was about to end, and I was going to be the one declaring checkmate. They wanted me unburdened? I would unburden them of everything they held dear. My life, before all this, had been a testament to a simple guiding principle: family first. Everything I did, every ounce of sweat I poured into my work, every sleepless night I spent worrying about bills and futures, it was all for them. For Eleanor, my rock and my compass for 50 years, and for Thomas, our only child, the boy who held the entire world in his bright, curious eyes. I wasn't born into wealth. I built my construction company from the ground up, starting with a single pickup truck and a set of second-hand tools. I remember the calluses on my hands being so thick they'd crack and bleed in the winter, and the exhaustion that was so profound it felt like a physical weight on my bones. But then I'd come home, and little Thomas would run into my arms, his small hands patting my tired face, and Eleanor would be there with a warm meal and a smile that could chase away any darkness. That was my fuel. That was my fortune. I remember the day I finally bought him his first bicycle, a shiny red Schwinn he'd been staring at in the store window for months. The look of pure, unadulterated joy on his face was worth more to me than any contract I had ever signed. I taught him how to ride it in the park, holding onto the back of the seat, my own back aching as I ran behind him, shouting encouragement. "You can do it, son. Just keep pedaling. I've got you." When he finally wobbled away on his own, a triumphant grin on his face, my heart felt like it would burst with pride. I had him. I would always have him. That feeling carried through every milestone. I paid for his college education without a second thought, ensuring he wouldn't be saddled with the kind of debt that had burdened me in my youth. I wanted him to have a head start, to reach higher than I ever could. He studied business and he was sharp. I was so proud of him, so sure that he had inherited my work ethic but would apply it in a world of suits and boardrooms, a world I had only ever built the foundations for. When he graduated, I co-signed the loan for his first decent car. When he wanted to start his own consulting firm, I gave him the seed money, a significant chunk of my savings, without asking for a single share in his company. "It's a gift, son," I told him, clapping him on the shoulder. "Make me proud," and he did for a while. His company was successful. He was featured in local business magazines. He moved in circles I could barely comprehend. He met Amelia at some upscale charity gala, and within 6 months, they were engaged. When he brought her home to meet us, I saw the way she looked around our comfortable but modest house. It wasn't with warmth or curiosity, but with the cool, appraising gaze of an auctioneer. Her eyes lingered on the paintings, the antique furniture, the solid, well-built structure of the home itself. She was calculating its value. But I was a father, blinded by my son's happiness. I dismissed my unease. I saw how Thomas looked at her, utterly besotted, and I told myself that his happiness was my own. For their wedding, I gave them the down payment for their sprawling house in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. It was an extravagant sum, more than I had spent on my own home, but nothing was too good for my boy. Eleanor had been hesitant. "Arthur," she had said quietly one night, "it's too much. They're adults. They should build their own life." I had patted her hand. "Eleanor, my love, what's the point of all this hard work if we can't give him the best possible start? We have enough. We'll be fine." I believed it. I truly believed that my generosity was an investment in his future, in his happiness. I saw it as the ultimate expression of a father's love. I never saw it for what it was becoming in their eyes. An expectation, precedent, a wellspring that they assumed would never run dry. Looking back now, I can see the trail of breadcrumbs leading to this dark place, each act of love and sacrifice another paving stone on the road to my own betrayal. I gave him a foundation, and he and his wife decided they would rather tear it down and sell the materials than build anything noble upon it. My love was just a resource to be exploited, and my life's work just a treasure chest they were tired of waiting to inherit. The change was insidious, a slow poisoning of the well. It didn't happen overnight. It was in the little things, the subtle shifts in tone and attitude that you try to ignore, attributing them to stress or the preoccupations of a busy life. But the pattern, once you allow yourself to see it, is undeniable. Amelia was the catalyst. Before her, Thomas, for all his ambition, still had a core of respect for us. He would call every Sunday, visit for holidays, and still ask for my advice, even if it was just a formality. After Amelia, the calls became less frequent, the visits shorter and more strained. They were always rushing off to some important dinner or a weekend trip to a vineyard. Our quiet, comfortable life seemed to be an embarrassment to them, a relic from a past they were eager to shed. Amelia's weapon of choice was the backhanded compliment, delivered with a saccharine smile. "Oh, Eleanor, This casserole is so rustic. It's just wonderful that you still make everything from scratch," she would say, her tone implying that anyone with any sense would have a private chef. Or to me, "Arthur, it's so admirable how you built your business with your own two hands. Things are so different now, of course. It's all about leverage and capital, not manual labor." Each word was a tiny, poisoned dart, designed to create distance, to establish their superiority and our obsolescence. I saw the effect it had on Thomas. He began to parrot her language. He started talking about legacy assets and estate planning with a new, unsettling urgency. He'd look at my classic, well-maintained car and say things like, "Dad, you should really get something safer, more modern. We could help you pick something out." What he meant was, "You should get something that befits our image." The first major crack appeared about 2 years ago. I had mentioned in passing that an old business associate had sold his company and was planning to travel the world with his wife. I'd said it with a hint of wistful admiration. Later that week, Thomas called me. "Dad," he started, his voice a strange mix of feigned concern and impatience. "I was thinking about what you said, about Mr. Henderson. It's got me and Amelia worried. You and Mom aren't getting any younger, and this big house, the business assets, it's a lot to manage. Have you thought about simplifying things?" I was taken aback. "Simplifying? Thomas, I'm retired. My life is as simple as it gets. Your mother and I are perfectly happy here," he pushed on, his voice losing its gentle veneer. "But is it practical? The upkeep on the house, property taxes, managing your portfolio. It's a burden. Amelia and I were talking, and we think it would be smart for you to start transferring some of those assets over to me now. I can manage them more effectively, get a better return. It would take the weight off your shoulders. We could set you and Mom up in a beautiful, modern condo. No stairs, full-service amenities. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." The condescension was staggering. He spoke to me as if I were a child, incapable of managing my own affairs. I, who had taught him the very concept of a balance sheet. "Thomas," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "my finances are my own concern. Your mother and I are fine. This conversation is over." The silence on the other end of the line was cold and heavy. "Fine, Dad," he finally said, his voice clipped. "Just trying to help." But it wasn't help. It was a takeover bid. They were testing the waters, seeing how easily the old man could be pushed. When I pushed back, they retreated, but I knew they hadn't given up. They just needed a new strategy. That incident was the turning point. It was the moment I stopped seeing my son and started seeing a stranger, a man molded by his wife's avarice. My pride in his success curdled into a sick feeling of dread. I had funded his ambition, and in doing so, I had bankrolled my own obsolescence in his eyes. He no longer saw me as his father, the man who built everything for him. He saw me as a dragon, hoarding a treasure that he and Amelia felt was rightfully theirs. And they were getting tired of waiting for the dragon to die. The moment of absolute, horrifying clarity came on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. It was a day like any other, or so it began. Eleanor was at her weekly book club meeting, a gathering she never missed. I was supposed to be at the community center, playing chess with my old friend Jim. It was a standing appointment. But Jim had called that morning to cancel. His granddaughter was ill. I found myself with an unexpectedly free afternoon. I tinkered in the garage for a while, oiled a squeaky door hinge, and then decided to settle into my study with a history book. The house was silent. I must have been engrossed in my reading for over an hour when I heard the front door open. I smiled, thinking Eleanor was home early. Then I heard their voices. Thomas and Amelia. My smile faded. An unannounced visit during the middle of a weekday was highly unusual. A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. I remained in my chair, hidden from the entryway by the angle of the door, and I listened. "Are you sure he's not home?" Amelia's voice was a sharp, impatient whisper. "Of course I'm sure," Thomas replied, his tone defensive. "It's Tuesday. He's at chess and Mom's at her book club. They're like clockwork, these old people. We have at least an hour for what?" I felt a chill creep up my spine. My hand, which had been about to push the study door open, fell to my side. I became as still as the old grandfather clock in the hall. "Good," Amelia said, her voice dripping with a satisfaction that made my skin crawl. "Let's find the financial statements. He probably keeps them in here." I heard their footsteps approaching my study. I held my breath. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was my home, my sanctuary, and they were invading it, rummaging through my life like a pair of common thieves. "He's just an old man, Tommy," Amelia said, her voice closer now. They were just outside the door. "He's sentimental and soft. He won't suspect a thing. We just need to get a clear picture of everything he has. The business remnants, the stock portfolio, any hidden accounts. He's from that generation that doesn't trust banks. He could have cash or gold squirreled away somewhere." Thomas's reply was weaker, laced with a pathetic thread of guilt that was quickly smothered by greed. "I don't know, Amy. This feels wrong." Snooping around his office. "What's wrong?" she hissed, her voice a venomous dart. "Is us struggling to maintain our lifestyle, juggling loans and appearances, while all this wealth just sits here, depreciating with his old-fashioned management. It's our legacy, Thomas. He owes it to you. He owes it to us. Once he signs the papers, we can finally move on with our lives, unburdened. This is for the best. He'll be more comfortable, and so will we." There it was, the word that sealed their fate in my mind. Unburdened. I was a burden. My life, my presence, the very air I breathed in my own home was a weight on their glorious, ambitious lives. They weren't just after my money. They were after my removal. The comfort she spoke of for me was the sterile comfort of a nursing home, a place where I would be out of sight and out of their way, my assets neatly transferred into their control. I heard the doorknob to my study begin to turn. In a single, silent movement, I slid from my chair and pressed myself flat against the wall behind the door, my body shrouded in shadow. The door swung inward, missing me by inches. I could smell Amelia's expensive perfume, a cloying, sweet scent that I would forever associate with betrayal. Through the crack in the hinges, I watched them. Amelia, brazen and purposeful, strode directly to my desk and began trying the drawers. Thomas lingered by the door, his face a miserable portrait of weakness and complicity. He wrung his hands, his gaze darting around the room that held so many memories of his childhood. The bookshelf I built for him, the globe I'd used to show him the world. He was desecrating that memory, and he knew it. I stood there, a ghost in my own home, and watched the son I had raised, the boy whose bicycle I had held steady, plot my dispossession with his venomous wife. In that silent, shadowed moment, the loving father in me died. He was mourned briefly and then buried. Something else took his place. Something colder, harder, and infinitely more patient. They thought I was a sentimental old fool. I would let them keep thinking it, right up until the moment I brought their carefully constructed world crashing down around their ears. When the front door finally clicked shut behind them, the silence they left in their wake was heavier and more profound than any I had ever known. I remained pressed against the wall for a long time, my muscles screaming in protest, but I couldn't move. It was as if their presence had left a toxic residue in the air, and I was afraid to breathe it in too deeply, afraid it would suffocate what little warmth I had left. I slowly emerged from my hiding place and walked to the center of my study. My desk drawer was slightly ajar. A file I kept on household warranties was out of place. They had been clumsy, arrogant. They hadn't found what they were looking for. I kept my real financial documents in a safe deposit box, a fact they were conveniently unaware of, but they had left their fingerprints all over my life. I sank into my leather chair, the one I'd bought with the first big bonus from my company 30 years ago. It had always been a seat of comfort, of satisfaction. Now it felt like a throne in a kingdom of ashes. The initial shock gave way to a wave of grief so powerful it buckled me over. It was a physical pain, a hot, searing agony in my chest. This wasn't a stranger who had betrayed me. It was my son, my Thomas, the little boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose fears of monsters under the bed I had soothed, whose future I had built with my own 2 hands. That boy was gone, replaced by a greedy changeling with his face. Tears, hot and bitter, streamed down my cheeks. I didn't try to stop them. It was the death of a sacred bond, and it deserved to be mourned. I wept for the son I had lost, for the trust that had been shattered into a million irreparable pieces, and for the naive old fool I had been. When Eleanor came home an hour later, she found me sitting there in the darkening room, my face stained with tears. She didn't say a word. She just came over, her hand gentle on my shoulder, and her presence was an anchor in the storm. "Arthur," she finally said, her voice soft but laced with a steel I had always admired. "What is it? What happened?" I told her everything. Every whispered word I had overheard, every condescending plan, every ounce of their venomous intent. I watched her beautiful face, the face I had loved for half a century, transform. Her initial shock melted away, replaced not by tears, but by a quiet, righteous fury that mirrored the cold thing growing in my own heart. Her hand on my shoulder tightened, her knuckles white. "Those ungrateful," she began, her voice trembling with rage, before she cut herself off, taking a deep, steadying breath. She looked me in the eyes, and in their depths, I saw not pity, but resolve. "So," she said, her voice now steady and clear, "what are we going to do about it?" That was the question that changed everything. It wasn't "what are you going to do?" but "what are we going to do?" We were a team. We had built this life together, and together we would defend it. The grief began to recede, washed away by the tide of her strength and my own burgeoning anger. The pain was still there, a dull, permanent ache, but it was no longer incapacitating. It was becoming fuel. "They think I'm weak, Eleanor," I said, my voice rough. "They think I'm a soft, sentimental old man who will just roll over and hand them everything." "They don't know you at all," she replied, her lips a thin, hard line. In that moment, the plan began to form. Not a detailed blueprint, but a clear, singular objective. I would not confront them. I would not rage or plead. That would give them the satisfaction of my pain. No, I would do something far more devastating. I would play their game. I would become the person they believed me to be. A doddering, slightly confused old man, eager for their help. I would lean into their narrative, draw them in closer, and make them feel utterly secure in their scheme. And all the while, in the shadows they were too arrogant to check, I would be meticulously, systematically dismantling the future they were so certain they had secured. The first call I made the next morning was to David Rosen, my lawyer for over 40 years. A man as sharp as a razor and as loyal as a brother. "David," I said, my voice calm and measured, "it's Arthur. I need to see you. We have some work to do. It's time to make some changes to my estate." The next 3 months were a masterclass in deception. I embraced my new role with an actor's dedication. When Thomas called, I made sure my voice was a little weaker, a little more uncertain. I would ask him to repeat himself, feigning hearing loss. I would get confused about dates and times. I became the caricature of old age they had painted in their minds. And they, in their boundless arrogance, bought it completely. "Dad, are you feeling all right?" Thomas would ask, his voice thick with a concern so fake it was almost laughable. "You sound a bit tired." "Just the years catching up with me, son." I'd sigh. "It's a lot, you know. This big house. All the paperwork. Your mother and I were just saying, maybe you and Amelia are right. Maybe it's time to simplify." I could almost hear the greedy grin spreading across his face through the phone line. "That's what I've been saying, Dad. We just want what's best for you. We can help. Just let us know what you need." "Oh, that would be a relief," I'd say. A real relief, while I was playing the part of the fading patriarch for my son. I was a whirlwind of focused activity in secret. My meetings with David Rosen, my lawyer, were frequent and productive. David, a shrewd man who had seen every flavor of human greed in his long career, listened to my story without surprise, his expression hardening with each detail. "The vultures," he said, shaking his head. "They always start circling when they smell money and perceive weakness. All right, Arthur, Let's build you a fortress, and so we did. The first step was to restructure everything. We created an irrevocable living trust, with Eleanor and myself as the sole lifetime beneficiaries. My assets, the stock portfolio, the real estate holdings, the residual income from my old business patents, were transferred into this trust. David and a trusted financial advisor from a firm he recommended were named as co-trustees. The key was the irrevocable part. Once the assets were in, they could not be removed, signed over, or contested by anyone. My will was completely rewritten. My previous will had, of course, left the bulk of my estate to Thomas. The new one was a work of art. It left a token sum, $1 to Thomas, in recognition of the son he once was. The rest, upon the passing of both Eleanor and myself, was to be liquidated, with the proceeds divided among 3 charities: a children's hospital, an animal shelter Eleanor had volunteered at for years, and a scholarship fund for underprivileged students entering the construction trades. Next, David did some digging into Thomas and Amelia's finances. It was worse and better than I could have imagined. They were leveraged to the hilt. The sprawling house, the luxury cars, the country club membership. It was all built on a mountain of debt. They were living far beyond their means, using Thomas's company's fluctuating income to service massive loans, likely assuming a huge inheritance would soon wipe the slate clean. This was their vulnerability. This was the dagger I would use. Through a discreet third-party acquisition company set up by David, we began to buy their debt. We purchased the second mortgage on their house from a struggling lender. We bought the note on Amelia's ridiculously expensive SUV. It was a complex, costly maneuver, but it put me, through several layers of legal abstraction, in the position of being their creditor. They were now, unknowingly, in debt to the very man they were trying to fleece. All the while, I kept up the act. I invited them over for dinner and listened patiently as Amelia talked about her latest $1,000 handbag, or, as Thomas explained, in patronizingly simple terms, some new investment trend. I would nod, look confused, and say things like, "Oh, that sounds so complicated. I'm glad I'll have you to handle all that soon, son." Their smiles were predatory. They were like sharks that had scented blood in the water, their caution replaced by a ravenous, reckless certainty. They were so sure of their victory, so confident in my decline, that they never once suspected the trap being laid around them. They saw an old man losing his grip, but they were the ones standing on a trapdoor, and my hand was on the lever. The week before Father's Day, their campaign of concern escalated dramatically. It was as if they had a deadline, a self-imposed finish line for their ghoulish marathon. The phone calls became daily. The unannounced visits grew more frequent. They would arrive bearing pastries and platitudes, their eyes scanning the house, reappraising their future belongings. Amelia, in particular, had dropped all pretense of subtlety. "Arthur, you really shouldn't be climbing that stepladder to change a light bulb," she chid, seeing me on the second step of a 3-foot stool. "What if you fell? You have to let us arrange for a handyman service." The implication was clear. "You are frail, you are a liability." One afternoon, they sat us down in the living room for a formal family meeting. It was a transparently staged intervention. Thomas held a glossy brochure for a place called Willow Creek Senior Living. It looked more like a luxury hotel than the grim nursing homes of my imagination, but it was a gilded cage all the same. "Mom, Dad," Thomas began, his voice oozing with rehearsed sincerity. "Amelia and I have been doing a lot of research. We've found this incredible community. It's 5-star dining, has a pool, organized activities, and on-site medical care 24/7. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing," Amelia chimed in, pointing at a picture of smiling, silver-haired residents playing bridge. "And it's so close to us. We could visit all the time. You'd be safe, and we'd have peace of mind knowing you're being looked after." I looked at Eleanor. Her expression was a perfect, placid mask, but I could see the fire in her eyes. I took the brochure and flipped through it slowly, as if giving it serious consideration. "Well, it certainly looks nice," I mumbled, squinting at the page. "But what about the house? Our home? That's the best part," Thomas said, leaning forward eagerly, unable to hide his excitement. "We would handle everything. We'd sell the house, and the proceeds would more than cover the entrance fee and monthly costs. I can manage the rest of your portfolio to ensure a steady income stream for you. You just have to sign the house over to me, and I'll take care of all the messy details. There it was. The endgame. The final move in their chess match. They wanted my signature. They wanted the keys to my kingdom. I played my part to perfection. I looked from the brochure to Thomas, a mask of weary confusion on my face. It's all so much to think about, I said with a heavy sigh. My head is spinning. Let me and your mother talk it over. It's a big step. They exchanged a triumphant look. They thought they had me. They thought the final barrier of my resistance was crumbling. Of course, Dad, Thomas said, patting my arm in a condescending gesture. Take your time, but don't take too long. We just want you to be safe. A few days later, the courier arrived with the Father's Day gift. The timing was impeccable. It was to be the final gesture, the grand display of love that would soften me up for the final push, the signing of the papers. They probably imagined me, overcome with emotion by their extravagant present, finally acquiescing to their wise and caring counsel. They envisioned a tearful, grateful old man, ready to hand over his life's work. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. As I stood there in my living room, staring at the box, at the tiny, sinister smudge Eleanor had spotted, I felt a profound sense of calm. The anger and the hurt were still there, but they were now forged into a single, sharp point of purpose. Every piece was in place. Every document was signed and filed. Every financial maneuver was complete. They had spent months planning my downfall, but I had spent the same months meticulously engineering theirs. They were walking into a fortress, believing it to be a ruin. They thought this Father's Day would mark the beginning of their new, unburdened life. And they were right in a way. It would be the beginning of a new life for them, just not the one they were expecting. Eleanor, I said, my voice steady and hard, get the phone. Call them. Tell them to come over immediately. Tell them I've made a decision about my future. And I want to thank them for their very thoughtful gift. Her lips curved into a grim, satisfied smile. With pleasure, Arthur, she said. With absolute pleasure. They arrived less than 20 minutes later. They must have broken speed limits to get here. Their faces were alight with poorly concealed avarice, the triumphant expressions of heirs apparent who are about to be crowned. Amelia was wearing a new dress, far too formal for a casual Sunday visit, as if she were already dressing for a celebratory dinner. Thomas had a folder tucked under his arm, and I had no doubt it contained the very documents he wanted me to sign. Deeds, power of attorney forms, the instruments of my own surrender. They swept into the living room, their fake smiles firmly in place. Dad! Mom! Thomas boomed, his voice unnaturally cheerful. Eleanor said you wanted to see us? We came as soon as we could. Did you make a decision? Amelia asked, her voice a pitch too high with excitement. She couldn't even wait for the pleasantries. I remained seated in my armchair, the large, still-wrapped box sitting on the coffee table in front of me like a silent judge. Eleanor stood near the fireplace, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I gestured to the sofa opposite me. Sit down, both of you. They sat, perching on the edge of the cushions like coiled springs, their eyes darting between my face and the gift box. First, I began, my voice calm and even, I want to talk about this. Your Father's Day gift. I gestured toward the box. It's very impressive. I was quite touched. In fact, I was just about to open it when Eleanor stopped me. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. I saw a flicker of something in Amelia's eyes. Not guilt, but anxiety. A flash of concern that their plan might have a flaw. Thomas, however, just looked confused. Stopped you? Why? He asked, a hint of irritation in his voice. It's just a gift, Dad. Is it? I asked softly. I leaned forward, my gaze locking onto his. Eleanor has sharper eyes than I do. She noticed something. A tiny mark, here in the corner. I pointed to the spot. And a smell. Faint, but distinct. Something chemical. It reminded me of my high school chemistry lab. I saw the color drain from Amelia's face. She knew. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Thomas still looked bewildered, but a seed of doubt was being planted in his duller mind. "I don't understand," he stammered. "What are you talking about?" "I have a theory," I continued, my voice never rising. "I think if I were to open this box, I might find a very sophisticated piece of electronics. Perhaps a small, battery-powered nebulizer. And inside that nebulizer, a canister of some aerosolized substance. Something fast-acting. A sedative, perhaps? Or something that would induce confusion, maybe even simulate the symptoms of a small stroke? Something that would create a medical emergency, proving once and for all that the old man can't be left on his own. Something that would make a compassionate son and daughter-in-law's decision to move him into care seem not just wise, but urgently necessary. A choked gasp escaped Amelia's lips. Her mask of composure shattered, revealing the raw, ugly panic beneath. Thomas stared at me, his mouth hanging open, his face a ghastly shade of pale. He looked at Amelia, a silent, desperate question in his eyes, but she refused to meet his gaze, staring at the box as if it were a venomous snake. "Of course," I went on, "that's just a theory. We could call the police and have them open it, have the contents analyzed. But I think I'd rather just keep it as a souvenir. A reminder." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of my words settle over them, crushing them. The air was thick with their silent, screaming guilt. But the gift, as sinister as it is really just a symptom of a larger problem, isn't it? The problem of your concern for my well-being. And that's what I really wanted to talk about. I have, as Eleanor told you, made a decision about my future. And you both have been so instrumental in helping me reach it. I reached down beside my chair and lifted a thick leather-bound portfolio. It was identical to the one David Rosen kept in his office. I placed it on the coffee table with a heavy, definitive thud, right next to their box of horrors. "You wanted to simplify my life," I said, a cold, humorless smile on my lips. "And I've taken your advice to heart. You see," I began, opening the portfolio on my lap, "after our little chat about Willow Creek, and after I overheard your very detailed planning session in my hallway a few months ago, I realized you were absolutely right. My affairs were too complicated. I was vulnerable." I looked directly at Thomas. "You said I needed help managing things, son. And I sought it out." I pulled out the first document, its crisp pages held together by a binder clip. "This is the Certificate of Trust for the Blackwood Family Irrevocable Trust, established 2.5 months ago. It's a rather brilliant legal instrument. All of my assets, the house, the stocks, the properties, everything have been transferred into it. Eleanor and I are the lifetime beneficiaries, meaning we have full use of everything until we're both gone. The trustees are myself, my lawyer David Rosen, and a senior partner at a very reputable wealth management firm. The key word, Thomas, is irrevocable. It means nothing can be removed. Nothing can be signed over. Nothing can be willed away. It's a fortress, just as David designed it." Amelia made a small, strangled noise. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the splotchy red patches of shock and rage blooming on her neck. Thomas just stared, his mind visibly struggling to process the information. "Which brings me," I continued, pulling out a second document, "to my new last will and testament, also filed and legally binding. My old will, as you know, named you, Thomas, as the primary heir. This new one is quite different. Upon our passing, the trust dictates that all assets be liquidated. The proceeds are to be split between the city's children's hospital, the St. Francis Animal Shelter, and a new trade school scholarship in my name. As for you, son," I paused, looking him dead in the eye, "I have left you the sum of $1. In recognition of the son you once were." Thomas flinched as if I had struck him. The folder he had brought, full of his useless papers, slipped from his numb fingers and scattered across the floor. You can't," he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "I'm your son, you were my son," I corrected him calmly. "My son would not have conspired with his greedy wife to steal from his own father. My son would not have tried to have me declared incompetent so he could get his hands on his inheritance a few years early. My son would not have brought this, I tapped the sinister gift box, into my home. Amelia finally found her voice, and it was pure venom. You old fool. You've given it all away to strangers. It was ours. It was Thomas's birthright. Nothing is a birthright. Eleanor's voice cut in, cold and sharp as glass. She had moved to stand behind my chair, her hand on my shoulder. It is earned. And you too have earned nothing but our contempt. I held up a hand to silence them. Oh, but I'm not finished, I said, a grim satisfaction in my voice. You see, your advice was so inspiring that I decided to get more involved in leverage and capital. As you put it, Amelia, I had my lawyer do some research into your finances. It's a precarious situation, isn't it? That beautiful house, the fancy cars, all built on a mountain of debt. I pulled out a final set of documents. This is a notification of debt acquisition. A few weeks ago, a private holding company, one that I happen to be the sole owner of, purchased several of your outstanding loans. Specifically, the second mortgage on your home and the loan on your imported SUV. As of this moment, you are in default for non-payment. Your grace period has, I'm afraid, expired. The holding company will be initiating foreclosure proceedings on the house and repossession of the vehicle. Effective tomorrow morning, the room fell into a dead silence, broken only by Amelia's ragged breathing. The color had completely drained from her face, leaving behind a waxy, translucent mask of pure horror. Thomas looked like a man who had been hollowed out, his eyes vacant, his body slumped in on itself. But how? He stammered. Our payments are current. They were, I said. But your primary lender was happy to sell the debt at a discount. And I, as the new creditor, have decided not to extend you any further credit. Business is business, after all. You taught me that. I closed the portfolio and placed it back on the table. My work was done. I had laid out their betrayal piece by piece, and then I had shown them the precise and devastating consequences. Their smug confidence was gone, replaced by the stark, terrifying reality of their ruin. They had come here today expecting to secure a fortune. Instead, they had lost everything. The house, the car, the inheritance, their future. All of it gone because they had underestimated the old man in the armchair. They had mistaken my love for weakness, and now they were paying the price. Amelia was the first to break. Her face, a canvas of disbelief moments before, twisted into a snarl of pure, unadulterated fury. She shot to her feet, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her body trembling with rage. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. You miserable old man. We'll sue you. We'll tell everyone what you've done. You've stolen our future. Stolen, I echoed, my voice remaining unervingly calm. An interesting choice of words. I haven't stolen anything. I have simply protected what is mine from those who tried to steal it from me. As for suing me, feel free. My lawyer, David Rosen, would be delighted to discuss the matter with you in court. Perhaps we can even bring this little gift box as evidence of your good intentions. I'm sure a jury would be very interested in your unique approach to elder care. Her face crumpled. The rage gave way to a desperate, panicked pleading. She turned to Thomas, who was still sitting in a catatonic state on the couch. Thomas, say something. Don't let him do this to us. It's your father. Make him stop. Thomas slowly lifted his head. There were tears in his eyes, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. He looked at me, his expression that of a petulant child whose favorite toy had been taken away. Dad, please, he whispered. Why would you do this? After everything you taught me, about family, about building something. I did this because of everything I taught you. I interrupted, my voice hard as granite. I taught you the value of hard work, of integrity, of loyalty. I gave you every advantage, every opportunity to build something of your own. And you did. But it wasn't enough for you. You and your wife looked at me and Eleanor, the people who sacrificed to give you that life, and you saw nothing but a final account to be plundered. You saw us as a burden. You wanted to be unburdened. Well, consider it done. I stood up, the full weight of my 68 years feeling less like a burden and more like a mantle of authority. I was no longer the frail old man of their imagination. I was the patriarch of this house, the architect of this life, and its final defender. You are unburdened of any future inheritance, I declared, my voice ringing with finality. You are unburdened of any further financial support from me. The bank will soon unburden you of your house and car. And as of this moment, you are unburdened of any familial obligation to us. We are no longer your parents. You are no longer our son. The finality of those words seemed to finally break through Thomas's stupor. A deep, guttural sob escaped his lips. It was not the sound of a man mourning his family, but the sound of a gambler who had lost everything on a final, desperate bet. Amelia just stared, her mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. Now, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dismissive tone. Get out of my house for a moment. Nobody moved. Then, Eleanor stepped forward. You heard him, she said, her voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable command of a queen banishing traitors from her court. Get out. Amelia, defeated, shot me one last look of pure hatred before turning and practically running from the room. Thomas stumbled to his feet, his face a mess of tears and shock. He looked at me, his mouth working, as if he wanted to say something, to offer some last-ditch plea or excuse. But no words came. There were no words left. He turned and followed his wife, a broken man shuffling towards a future he had single-handedly destroyed. I watched them go, two ghosts departing from a life they had forfeited. The front door closed behind them with a soft click, and the house was once again filled with a profound silence. But this silence was different. It was clean. It was peaceful. It was the silence of victory. Eleanor came and stood beside me, slipping her hand into mine. Her fingers were warm and steady. It's done, Arthur, she said softly. I squeezed her hand, a wave of exhaustion and relief washing over me. I looked at the coffee table, at the elegant, sinister box sitting next to my leather portfolio, the instruments of their treachery and my triumph. Yes, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's done. We had lost a son, but we had saved ourselves. The price was agonizing, but the cost of inaction would have been our dignity, our security, and our peace. In the end, it wasn't a choice at all. It was a necessity. And as I stood there, in the quiet of my home, with the woman I loved by my side, I did not feel triumph or joy. I felt a deep, profound, and sorrowful satisfaction. I had faced the monster that my own love had inadvertently helped create, and I had won. The house was safe. The future was secure. The dragon had protected its treasure.